extended area of space. The reason is the existence of a costly and complex communications satellite called TID-RES. Behind TID-RES is a story of high flying in the earthbound world of finance. Special assignment reporter Pat Clawson investigated the money that made TID-RES possible.
The date, June 29th, 1983. The place, a control room at NASA's Goddard Space Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. The event, the rescue of a giant communications satellite nicknamed TID-RES, more than $300 million worth of hardware that went off course and was nearly lost in space. TID-RES stands for the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System, the most advanced communications satellite project in history. TID-RES will serve as the communications command post for nearly every civilian and military satellite America puts into orbit over the next decade. 3 orbiting satellites, one over the Atlantic, one over the Pacific, and a spare, will provide almost continuous communications with 26 low-orbiting spacecraft, such as the Space Shuttle. Technicians have been working on an engineering miracle for weeks, firing tiny 1-pound thruster rockets in a desperate attempt to move the 2.5-ton satellite more than 8,000 miles into a correct orbit.
Come on, all 3 of us. All together. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead. Baby bird.
With that order, technicians trigger the final rocket burn nearly 23,000 miles away in space. As NASA engineers nervously check instruments, the final maneuver works.
+5, 47, 48, burn, terminate.
The miracle is achieved. The satellite is saved.
It is, I think, an example for the world. It's certainly an example for the country that we are able to do this in full view of the world. We don't hide anything. We tell them exactly what we're going to do. We tell them about our troubles, and we let them know every stage of the way.
Something that's not in the limelight is the financial foundation of this project. Our investigation of the $2.7 billion TID-RES program reveals a web of unusual financial deals between government and big business. This is the headquarters of Spacecom, the space communications company located in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Spacecom has been the prime NASA contractor on the TID-RES project since 1976, when it was part of Western Union Corporation, the giant telecommunications company. Spacecom is now owned by 2 major defense contractors: Fairchild Industries, a mammoth aerospace conglomerate, and Continental Telecom, one of America's largest independent telephone companies. Spacecom has an unusual and very beneficial business deal with NASA to build and operate the TID-RES system for the next 10 years. TID-RES contracts and a series of loan agreements provide Spacecom with millions of dollars in business benefits at virtually no risk. In order to understand this deal, it's important to know some history. In the mid-70s, NASA thought a satellite system could improve space communications and save lots of money by eliminating the need for expensive ground tracking stations. A good idea, but NASA did not have the money for it. Usually, NASA officials would come over here to Congress and ask for an appropriation. But Congress was already spending billions of dollars for the space shuttle. It wasn't enthusiastic about spending even more money on a satellite system. So NASA officials huddled here at headquarters and came up with a different approach. They decided a private company such as Spacecom could privately finance and build TID-RES, then rent it to the government. That way, taxpayers would save on construction costs. The government would get use of a satellite system, and efforts to commercialize space would be given a boost at the same time. That was the idea, but things did not go according to plan. NASA asked private companies to bid on the project, but Wall Street investment firms were scared off by the high risk and huge capital requirements, $500 million. Hopes evaporated for private financing of TID-RES. NASA then agreed to finance it with government-backed loans. Western Union Space Communications Company, the original Spacecom, eventually won the construction contract with a proposal for a shared satellite system. Part of it would be used for government space communications, the other part for a private commercial service called Advanced Westar. Spacecom also won an exclusive 10-year operating contract. NASA and Spacecom got the money for the TID-RES project here at the U.S. Treasury from the Federal Financing Bank, an obscure agency that makes low-interest government-backed loans. The complex and unusual loan agreement between NASA, Spacecom, and the Federal Financing Bank works like this. The Federal Financing Bank loaned Spacecom more than $1 billion to finance TID-RES construction. NASA agreed to guarantee and pay back the entire loan, all of the interest and principal. Spacecom agreed to give NASA some construction contract profits to reinvest in the project. NASA auditors said that reinvestment is questionable because all of Spacecom's money came from the federal loan that NASA has to pay back. NASA was happy with the deal because it didn't have to pay back the loan until years later when the satellite system was actually in operation. NASA auditors said essentially the government was borrowing from the government to Spacecom's benefit. Spacecom will give NASA use of the satellite system. In return, Spacecom gets possible income tax benefits worth hundreds of millions of dollars and potential opportunities for commercial use of the system. In addition to the loan, Spacecom also will receive millions of dollars in profits from NASA through the TDRS operation contract. NASA officials admit the financial deal is unusual, but say it's necessary to get private industry into space.
We're trying to commercialize space as much as possible. The financial arrangement in the end is no different at all than a direct appropriation of the program or a direct buying of the program as we do on normal development projects.
Our investigation shows that's not quite the case. After putting up all that money, NASA doesn't even own the satellite system. An examination of the loan agreements and the NASA contracts reveals that Spacecom has been awarded legal title, the full legal ownership of the entire TDRS system, even though it has invested relatively little of its own money in the project. The contract gives NASA an option, a right of first refusal, to buy the TDRS system in 10 years for $1. But that doesn't mean much. NASA officials say the system's expected lifespan is only 10 years. Fairchild Industries Vice President Manny Fanakis, chairman of Spacecom's management committee, downplayed the importance of ownership.
Your company has not put up any money at the present time to finance that system. You now have title to an asset worth over $1 billion. And you don't see anything a little unusual about that?
No, because that asset we cannot dispose of, we cannot sell it, and we cannot obtain profit of that unless it performs a certain function for the government.
But you expect to obtain profit from it, don't you?
If we do the job, or if we don't do the job, we'll pay penalties. It all depends how well we manage the program.
Spacecom's penalties to NASA in the event of non-performance are limited to $65 million. NASA and Spacecom officials say the company faces little risk of losing that money. NASA officials aren't concerned about Spacecom's legal ownership of the satellite system.
The ownership may be meaningful to somebody with a system like this. However, the government has total rights to all the satellite services that are available. So in effect, the ownership of the system does not provide the owners a commercial, a resource that they can obtain or lease services to anyone other than NASA at this point.
Despite Aller's statement, our examination of TDRS project contracts shows Spacecom can use part of the satellite system for commercial purposes starting in 1985. Further, the ownership may give Spacecom tax benefits worth hundreds of millions of dollars. NASA Inspector General June Gibbs Brown says because Spacecom is the legal owner of the satellite system, the company can claim depreciation and possibly investment tax credits as well. A final determination has not yet been made by the Internal Revenue Service. NASA Associate Administrator Robert Smiley recently told me off camera that Spacecom could write off at least $100 million a year in depreciation over the next 10 years. However, he refused to talk about that when I attempted to interview him on camera. One of the things we wanted to ask you is how much this company is going to be able to take in depreciation for this asset. Go. Could you tell me, sir? In our next report, we'll look at massive construction cost overruns and examine how a congressional subcommittee has failed to keep tabs on the TDRS project. Pat Clawson, CNN Special Assignments, Washington.